we'll start with this. Well, Hannah Rankin, a common opponent for both Claressa Shields and Savannah Marshall. She was asked, who does she think would win the super fight between them? And Hannah Rankin backs Claressa Shields to beat Savannah Marshall. She said, having fought both of them, I see Claressa winning that fight. When the fight does happen, I hope it's going to be happening soon because it's such an exciting fight. It will be a real blockbuster for women's boxing between two top-level boxers, and middleweight is such an exciting weight category anyway. Claressa has a huge reputation, and Savannah is building hers up too. It has all the hallmarks of a fantastic fight, but I'm going for Claressa for the win. And, professional anecdotes are still just anecdotes. I often find myself wondering when a fighter backs one fighter
to beat another.
What's it all really based on? Because depending on the relationship between the fighters in this triangle,
that might be what's really motivating the answer.
Claressa Shields' decision, Hannah Rankin, whereas Savannah Marshall brutally stopped her.
Stopped her in 7 rounds.
I don't know what the relationship is like between Hannah Rankin and Savannah Marshall, though it does seem like Hannah has maintained a good professional relationship with Claressa Shields. Could that be why she's backing Claressa to beat Savannah? Or is it just sweet science?
Those are just her professional anecdotes.
And the forecast, as it were, is based on nothing else except Hannah's experiences with both fighters. Her experiences in the ring with Savannah Marshall and her experiences in the ring with Claressa Shields. Is that all it is? Is that all it's based on? Your guess is as good as mine. In truth, the outcome of this match won't be decided by anecdotes. Hannah Rankin's, yours, or mine. It's going to be decided by the two girls in the ring.
There's a lot of people think Savannah's going to stop Claressa.
And I think that a good number of those people, what they want is for Savannah to stop Claressa, though that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it's going to play out. That's the way it's going to happen. I will say, I think Savannah's the biggest puncher.
I think Savannah's the biggest puncher Claressa will have fought.
Much bigger puncher than Hannah Gabriels, who knocked Claressa down in the first round of their fight. Hannah Gabriels, who moved up from junior middleweight to middleweight for that fight, managed to drop Claressa in the first round. Claressa, she managed to turn it around after that. I think Savannah's a bigger puncher than Hannah Gabriels, and a bigger puncher even than Christina Hammer, who does happen to have a quality right hand, throws good straight shots, though beyond that, she's a bit limited. She can't box on the inside.
She gets flustered if you crowd her.
Savannah Marshall has the size and punching power that Hannah Gabriels did not, but she also has the inside game, Christina Hammer, that she didn't have.
Neither one of them are ambidextrous.
I'll tell you, I've been watching Hannah Rankin a long time. I never saw Hannah Rankin take a beating like the beating that she took at the hands of Savannah Marshall. The punching power that Savannah Marshall exhibits is no byproduct of smoke and mirrors. It's no mere illusion. The stopping power she has is real, though power in and of itself means nothing if you can't land. So it's a question of
be avoided
whether or not Claressa Shields can offset Savannah's power with her laser jab and with her boxing. The keys to victory for Claressa: to stay off the line, don't make yourself a stationary target, don't stand in one place for too long, and counter in kind. Make Savannah Marshall hesitant to throw by using that hand speed to catch and shoot.
You get counted enough times, you ain't going to want to throw.
And that'll sap the power out of the power shots. That'll take the bad intentions off of them. If you can't throw with confidence because every time you do, you get countered,
there goes any chance of landing a knockout.
Claressa herself, she's no knockout puncher. I mean, I think we've seen enough of her to realize that she really ain't got the biggest punch. But she can outbox Savannah Marshall if she plays her cards right, or at minimum, offset some of that power. For Savannah, the keys are a little bit different because Savannah's ambidextrous, able to lead with either the left hand or the right hand, able to fight out of the orthodox or southpaw stances. I think Savannah should start the fight off as a southpaw. That will help to offset the orthodox jab of Claressa Shields, and rather than head-hunting,
looking to land big shots upstairs,
Claressa's a hard target. She's elusive. She's defensively sound. Looking to land a big right hand upstairs, Claressa's going to see that coming. But the body, that's a little bit harder to protect.
Yeah, she could keep her head off the line, but not her whole torso.
I think it's the body that Savannah Marshall has to target, I do. Because she's got so much height, so much reach, she doesn't need to be within close quarters to land a power shot on Claressa Shields, especially one aimed towards her midsection, towards her body. I don't think Clarissa's used to girls going downstairs on her.
Let alone girls that can punch like Savannah.
I think if Savannah makes a conscious effort to go to Shields' body early, that'll break her down in a way that Shields really isn't used to, because I don't think she's used to girls going there on her. And, you really don't recover from those body shots the same way you do those head punches. Those body shots, they'll take the fight right out of you. That might cause Shields to drop her hands and then give Savannah the openings to land big shots upstairs. Somewhere, I don't know, at the midway point of the fight, where she can then switch off to an orthodox stance and look to land a big right hand. After some damage has set in, the keys to victory for both fighters, they are different. For Clarissa, the keys to victory are all about hand speed, quick counters, keeping that head off center, staying off the line, using movement to offset the power of Savannah Marshall. Whereas for Savannah, it's all about starting that fight off as a southpaw to offset Shields' jab, targeting the body, breaking her down, then switching off at the midway point to an orthodox stance to set up a big right hand. It's
Easier said than done.
so at this level, what isn't? In 140-pound news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall's undisputed junior welterweight title clash has been postponed to February 26 at the Ovo Hydrate in Glasgow as a result of Josh Taylor
Suffering a knee injury.
The news is pretty upfront, pretty straightforward, not too many layers to it. I don't think people are approaching this injury cancellation with all the same skepticism they're approaching Dillian White's cancellation with. A lot of people feel that Dillian's pulling out of that Otto Wallin fight because he wants to be fast-tracked to a Tyson Fury fight. This fight, in reference to Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall, it's not really an outright cancellation so much as a postponement, because so long as Josh holds all the belts at 140 pounds, in this situation, the WBO, he has to satisfy his mandatory challenger or relinquish the title to him, and Josh ain't moving up to welterweight yet.
This just is what it is.
Conspiracy theorists with their conspiracy theories need not apply here. You can take this story at face value. Josh hurt his knee, and he's not going to be fighting later on this year. They're going to reschedule it for early next year. And what this essentially means is that any plans that Teofimo Lopez might have had of facing Josh Taylor early next year have been effectively pushed back. I saw some news, some rumors, some rumblings about Teofimo may be moving up in weight, facing Josh next year, early next year, around the spring. That might turn into the summer months.
On the heels of this news, it might.
It just is what it is. And here I thought that things were going smoothly for Josh Taylor, being able to get this mandated title fight out of the way without all of the drama, all the ups and downs we saw in reference to Lopez versus Kambosos and how long it's taken to get that over the line. I guess I spoke too soon.
God forbid things run smoothly.
Without any hiccups and impromptu snafus. Not in the sport of boxing, theater of the unexpected in more ways than one, inside and outside of the squared circle. Another news, a follow-up on a story we've been talking a lot about here on the channel. Yordenis Ugas has been denied the title unification bout with Errol Spence. He's ordered to face Eimantas Stanionis. Portion of the article reads, PBC officials sent a letter from Spence's doctor stating that he'll be cleared to fully resume training November 1st, sources said. Spence was scheduled to fight Manny Pacquiao in August, but withdrew from the bout after he suffered a detached retina. Ugas stepped in on 11 days' notice and scored an upset victory to claim the title. The target date for Spence versus Ugas was February 22nd, according to the ruling. However, Mendoza had no confidence Spence would actually be ready to fight then. The WBA also would have required Spence to be approved by an independent doctor if it had approved the special request, Mendoza said. I think it's pretty obvious that the WBA is out for their interests only, Ugas told ESPN on Wednesday through his manager, Luis de Cubas Jr., who translated, he's trying to stop one of the best fights of the year by having me fight an unknown fighter with 13 fights. Ugas described Mendoza's past actions as suspicious, referring to his appointment of Judge Gloria Martinez Rizzo, whom the WBA suspended indefinitely after her highly controversial scorecard in the Mikael Fox versus Maestre fight, and the uncovering of racist tweets on an account belonging to her, an account that has since been deactivated. He's shown tendencies to not do things correctly to now all of a sudden be the Pope. Ugas said. It's very suspicious to me. Me and my legal team are going to dig into this scenario because it doesn't seem right. And there's definitely damages to my career that have been done by this decision that has no merit.
What damages?
Yordanis Ugas has been acting less and less like a champion that has obligations to fulfill and more like a petulant child throwing his toys out of the pram because he, among many other WBA champions, is under orders to satisfy his mandatory.
Oh, sweetheart. Do your job.
I feel like fighters should start changing their stances on giving the WBA 3% of their purses for sanctioning fees, Ugas said. That's the same percentage they pay team members. I flew to Colombia to sit down with Mendoza. He won't take my calls, he won't see me. Every single person who has a WBA title should take notice. If my name was Gabriel Maestre or Jorge Linares, or any other Venezuelan fighter he's affiliated with, I wonder if he would still have me stranded. Mendoza said he never agreed to meet with Ugas and that it would be unethical to do so ahead of a pending ruling. And I'm not trying to convince you that Gilberto Mendoza is a saint by any stretch of the imagination, but he's got too much heat on his back right now to worry about the PBC's special interests. Up until recently, up until this point, Gilberto Mendoza has seemed like just another arm of the PBC.
Seemed like they were working together.
Has Yordanis Ugas already forgotten who put that WBA title in his hands after having stripped Manny Pacquiao? Did he already forget whose decision that was? I mean, who made that decision? Where did it come from? It came from the WBA.
Now that they're doing their job, all of a sudden you got a problem with them.
Well, if we're being honest, the only reason that they're doing their job all of a sudden is because they're under pressure from the Alphabet Commission. That's what this is all about. That's why they're ordering all of these fucking fights and consolidating all of these trinket secondary titles.
Large number of which washed up on the shores of PBC's Isolation Island.
Yordanis Ugas himself used to have one, as does Jamal James, one of the guys in that four-man tournament the WBA ordered. I mean, Yordanis Ugas is being a bit of a drama queen, if I do say so myself, likening the WBA to a dictatorship as if he is somehow a freedom fighter.
And all you want is the freedom to sit out the rest of the year.
To wait for Errol Spence Jr. sometime next year, in February. There are approximately 3 close to 4 months between now and February 22nd. Plenty of time for this guy to get back out there at least one more time this year and take care of his mandatory. Because if he has it his way, when exactly does Stanionis get a title shot? And all of these bleeding hearts siding with the plight of Yordanis Ugas can't seem to see the forest for the trees, because all he's really advocating for is the freedom to wait for a fighter that isn't even medically cleared to train, much less fight, until next month. The guy's expecting the WBA to give him a waiver to skip out on a mandatory for a fight that isn't even made yet.
If the fight were actually made, I could see.
I could understand, but what you actually want is more time in order to make the fight, while you, the WBA welterweight champion, sit on your hands and wait with a mandatory outstanding. So what you want the WBA to do is freeze the ranks, hold out on mandating a fight so that you can play the waiting game with Spence.
Ugas ain't even the only champion under orders.
This is just one of several mandates that has come down by way of the WBA because they're being forced to clean up their act, because they're being forced to consolidate their world titles to just one per weight class. And Ugas being a WBA champion, he's a part of that conversation. He's a part of that picture. And you know what? If he don't like it, and he's so averse to the WBA's business practices, then relinquish the title.
Problem solved.
Now, what this news has essentially revealed is the ETA for Errol Spence Jr.'s eventual ring return. They were looking to get him back out there in February, late February, against Ugas. But now that Ugas is all tied up with Stanionis, well, Spence is going to need a dance partner. It's not like Ugas can drop the title to prioritize a Spence fight, because if he does, he won't be a priority to Spence. The only reason Spence was looking at him is because he's got that belt. If he ain't got that belt, then he ain't got no fight.
He's stuck.
Now, if Errol Spence Jr. was looking to unify titles straight away with a champion at welterweight, then I don't see why he can't just swap out Ugas for the winner of Crawford versus Porter. What's the problem? I think the winner of that fight is going to be Terrence Crawford. I think he's going to retain that title. I think he's going to knock Sean Porter out is what I think. And if Spence was okay to face Ugas late February of next year, why can't he just face Crawford?
What's the problem?
Terrence Crawford himself, he says he's over it. He said that fight, it's past him. He's moving on to do other things. But I think that if Errol Spence Jr. actually expressed an interest in doing the fight and it were an earnest interest early next year, the fight could get done. I'm not holding my breath for that to happen. If Spence don't want to face Crawford early next year, the next best candidate to do a fight, a big fight, or at least a decent-sized one, would have to be Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman, who we all know, Spence don't want to do no favors, and he don't want to give him the time of day. But Keith is coming off a stint of inactivity the same way that Errol is coming off a stint of inactivity. If Errol's not set to return until early next year, that's over a year's time since he last fought. That's over a year since the Danny Gersha fight of late last year.
Keith's been out a lot longer than Errol.
But Keith wasn't in a car accident like Errol. And Keith's not the one whose eye was falling out of his eye socket earlier this year.
Both damaged goods in a way.
And both guys are coming off of lengthy stints of inactivity. If Errol can't get Ugas in the ring because Ugas is all tied up with Stanionis, and for some reason he's not interested in the winner of Crawford versus Porter, there's Keith Thurman.
And he says he wants that fight.
He says he has no plans of moving up to the junior middleweight division. He's got no plans of campaigning at 154 pounds. He's staying at welterweight. Looks a lot like Keith Thurman is going to be a career welterweight. So, I mean,
Errol can tune up with Keith Thurman.
and for what it's worth, given Keith Thurman's gift of gab, his mouthpiece, I think Errol Spence Jr. versus Keith Thurman pay-per-view could do considerably better business than that Danny Garcia pay-per-view did, because the numbers for that weren't nothing to write home about.
What'd that do, 225, 250?
I think he could do at least 275, maybe 325, 350 even, with Keith Thurman. The situation has changed. Where Ugas was available to Spence before, he's not available to him now. And, Spence was likely looking at Ugas' title, because he's still trying to leverage the situation with Terrence Crawford. I mean, it seems that way. They want to have leverage over that guy. But the buy rate for Terrence Crawford's next fight, that needs to be considered as well. What if Crawford versus Porter does better numbers than Spence versus Garcia did?
There's more interest for this fight than that fight.
That was Errol Spence's last outing. Well, what if Terrence Crawford's next outing does better business than Spence's?
Uh-oh.